Okay. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for this Friday chat on Saturday. So what we've seen last week, and it looks like Australia is with El Niña or La Niña, it's seeing similar things. A lot of adverse weather. So Michael, Anthony, if you can maybe talk to us about the impact of a very bad weather during a hockey game, how you get ready for that, and how you can handle it. And maybe if we've got a little bit of time left, we'll talk about some of what Oliver has been able to share with us with his players. So that'll be the chat for today. Let's go. Michael, Anthony, you on?
Okay, well, I'll just start it off. I mean, we're in a La Nina, which we're in for wet weather for I think most of summer. I think normally we're in El Nino, which means we're very dry and all the rest of it. So we don't generally have problems with playing on wet surfaces. Occasionally, a little bit, but I mean, when we coached internationally, that's when we had a heap of problems in different places because the variation on the different types of turfs make a huge impact on the terms of collection of water. I mean, some turfs have what we call a camber. In fact, all of them have a camber. Camber just means they have a kind of a slope where the water drains off to the sides and it gets refiltered. And if the camber's too big, then you find you get a nice dry strip through the middle and you get sludge puddles everywhere on the side. And that makes it really difficult to play hockey. But a lot of the modern turfs now have really good drainage and are almost flat. They might have a 1 degree or 2 degree camber now. So it makes a huge difference. Anthony, anything?
Yeah, well, coming out of playing in New Zealand, we would play it on wet a lot, given the nature of the place. And there's a couple of key things about playing on wet. The first thing is the ball has to be in the air a lot more. And so that would be dribbling the ball in the air, carrying the ball in the air, passing the ball in the air. So that puts pressure on receiving skills. And generally what you've got to do is shorten your passes up a bit because it's harder to pass over a long distance. So the ability to flick the ball, 3D skills, all these things become crucial. And the speed of the game has to slow down a bit because you just can't do things fast. So teams like Australia will struggle because they play fast and intense and all those things. And because of that, they can't, if you like, utilize their key strength, which is that speed and intensity of work. It has to change because of the surface. So they have to adjust their play and their natural play. So that's always a challenge for Australia that they're not used to that. And if you play on a normal surface against Australia, one of the challenges in trying to beat Australia would be to stop them with that flow and speed and intensity. So you make the game stop, start and disruptive, and they'll get pissed off quickly because they want to play fast. That's the way they operate. So a wet surface for Australia is pretty much the biggest nightmare they would have on a surface trying to play. And the best fun for Australia would be a super fast dry surface, super fast, because it works for the way they want to play. But other teams would adjust to it a bit easier on that because they're not less reliant on speed. So Belgium, for example, would cope with that wet surface a little bit better than Australia. But the key to it is shorter passes, ball in the air for everything you're doing, and therefore receiving skills of ball in the air become important.
And it's much more difficult for girls than boys. Much more difficult.
And I guess hitting a ball becomes a lot more important as well because you can't just push it around. You have to be able to generate more power.
Yeah.
Power, but the power in the air, you have to be able to hit the ball. It's a good practice to hit the ball, 30 centimeters in the air. It can't go on the ground. It doesn't matter how hard you hit it. If it's a puddle, it'll just stop.
Which means that sometimes the slap hit's not particularly useful. You got to learn to stand up and hit, get the ball in the air.
And hit it in the air, push it in the air, flick it, carry the ball in the air. All those things become really important. And shorter passes, quite clearly, the passes can't be as long.
Yep.
And the other thing you got to do is be really cautious about passes that go across the field in a danger zone. So, you might find back passes are easy on a normal pitch, but in a wet pitch, it might just stop somewhere you don't want it to stop. And so that's a high risk maneuver in those circumstances. You wouldn't do it.
And you also find your skills If you're just a normal dribbler and it's flat on the ground, if you go to the corners or the sides where the greater concentration of water is, it's very difficult. You've got to be strong, but you've got to learn to move the ball in the air. Otherwise you're just going to get caught. Then the umpire becomes difficult for an umpire then because danger comes into it, or leading to danger as well. So those skills are infinitely harder than a normal game situation.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's very difficult in the whole way in everything you're doing in that set of circumstances. Games to me, if you think about when I was a young person playing on grass, you played on good grass fields and bad grass fields and muddy grass fields. All those things just happened. So it was pretty normal to adjust the way you played depending on which field you played on. But people these days are just expecting to play on a perfect surface all the time. And it's perhaps a little bit naive that we don't prepare our players properly for adverse conditions.
Mm. And remember, in the old days, we used to use cricket balls. And when they got wet, they used to swell. And terrible wooden sticks.
Say again about the cricket balls? You used to use for hockey. You
see that field behind me? See that field behind me? Yes. They would have used cricket balls on that white painted
leather.
Cricket balls. Leather
balls. So when they get wet, they get bigger.
They swell.
So what was it? It was because that was how hockey was played, or is it because there was a specific purpose?
Plastic wasn't invented then, and compounds.
That's what you had as a hockey ball was leather.
Yeah.
They were quite nice to play with, had a really good feel about them, but if they got wet, they were a disaster.
Yeah, they weren't they? And when they hit you, woo.
Yeah.
Where you get dimples now, used to have a nice line where the stripe is, where the seam of the ball would get you. And that would stay for a long time.
Yeah, so the range of skills on an adverse conditions on a wet pitch, you can practice on a dry pitch. And so those aerial skills players should be able to do anyway. The key is really how you set up your team to play that game on that day and prepare them mentally. Because some players will be in a panic mode over it. Oh, blimey, we can't possibly play. But you have to be able to convince them that it's okay. It's just rain. There's a bit of water. Let's just keep going, and here's the way you're going to play. And give them that strategy on how to play.
And at the end of the day, if you know what you're going to be doing in those conditions, you've already got a better chance of winning potentially because your opposition might not know what to do.
You should take advantage of the fact that some of their players will be going, I don't want to play in this weather. I don't like the rain. I don't like the wet pitch, blah, 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 blah. You want your players to go, yes, let's go. Jump out there and let's have a real crack at this. Because you've already got an advantage when you've got that attitude with your team. So that attitude is a really important starting point in how you set up your team to play. And you shouldn't be embracing any negative around the rain. You should be saying, let's bring on the rain, let's go, that sort of thing. It's the same with anything that's adverse. You might get 45 degrees and it's hot. Yeah, sure. You have to convince those players that it's not hot and let's go. It's a game. Let's get into it.
Yeah. I mean, when Sandeep was playing in England, he's rung me, and it was freezing. It was like 1 degree. The rain was coming in flat. And he said to me, I'm looking like an Englishman now. He said, I've turned white. He said, I don't want to go and play out there. So, if you know Sandeep.
But these things, this attitude, the attitude is really important. So even, particularly with girls, when the ball comes up off the ground with girls in and around the circle, there are a lot of the girls will kind of back off from it, will shy away from the ball, thinking it's dangerous. But if you're teaching your players to actually hunt that ball out when it's in the air, whether it be adverse conditions or not, then they're going to find they're going to get on the ball more, and those other players will just let it happen around them. So it's particularly relevant with girls. Boys are less likely to do that a lot. They're probably less worried about preserving their own body parts. They probably worry about it less than the girls do. And so you'll see it all the time with girls that they'll just back off and the ball will just dribble on the ground around them. But if your team's got that attitude of I'm going to hunt that ball out, irrespective of where it goes, then you're more likely to be on the ball a lot. So it's an advantage for your team.
We've been talking so far in the Friday chats, in the master classes, really a lot about speed of execution and really trying to improve that, and not just going fast, but really having a good workflow where everything is executed at optimum pace. But here with that weather, so the focus really changes.
It does. You still want to be quick and efficient with what you're doing, but there's a level of strength that has to come in, and there's a level of deliberateness that has to come in that just inherently makes it a little bit slower than the super fast that you're trying to get the players to do in normal conditions. So if you try to be really slick with skills on a wet surface, then you'll probably fail because it just won't work.
And overheads play a much more important role, and therefore the tactical setup of how you use them is more critical as well, because when the ball bounces, it doesn't bounce off the field, it tends to bounce and just die. So, you know, it's a different tactical type of game you play, and you use more overheads in that situation. So
I've got the video of so I'm not able to make it full screen, but I can share my screen where we can see how the weather was like. Just do that.
before you do that, we had a game when I was playing for Australia against Pakistan in Malaysia.
Yeah.
And if you ever know Malaysia, at between 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock, thunderstorms, lightning, rain like you wouldn't believe. Anyway, we're playing Pakistan, and 20 minutes into the game, the heavens have opened up, the lightning and thunder and everything, and about 100 metres away from the ground, a lightning bolt hit the back of the ground. Anyway, the Pakistanis all got down on their knees and started praying, and we raced off under the tents. So, yeah, game was abandoned. And usually in Malaysia, games, you know, in those old days, they were abandoned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The rainy season, when that happens, it's wet. When you go to somewhere like Kuala Lumpur, the gutters are very big there. And the reason for that is the rain is so heavy. It's got to cope with that heavy rain for that hour that it rains at that time of the year.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's the back end. All right, so you can guess the ball right on the right-hand corner.
Yeah.
Managed to get there, and the magic happens.
Is that Bloomingdale?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. I've had quite a few dinners there.
Who made that pass? Matt Dawson.
It looked like Matty Dawson, yeah.
Yeah.
There's the water and leaves as well.
Yeah. Where's this played? At Amsterdam.
No,
Bloomingdale.
Bloomingdale.
Because you can see by the club rooms in the corner there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because Amsterdam's on the other side.
Like, yeah.
It's right on the seaside.
Yep.
Yeah.
So who won that game?
Sorry?
Who won that game?
I think this is Amsterdam.
No, I think Bloomingdale won it. Yeah, let me check.
It's good to have experts on the show.
That pass is a good pass, right? But it's a high risk pass in those conditions.
And that's the kind of pass you expect Arthur van Doorn to pull off, and not very many other people in the world, to be honest.
Yeah, Dawson's a good passer.
He's a good passer, yeah. He's a very good passer.
So what you
Whether he could have pulled that off would be that's a little bit of a surprise, that one, but good luck to him. But boy, had that failed, they're in deep trouble.
But the thing is, you see they're 2 against 5 if you count the goalkeeper.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, that's the first time I ever saw that was Siddhar Singh did that one.
Okay, 3 against 5. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Bloomingdale won 4-2.
How's Amsterdam going?
Failing by the sounds of it.
They're mid-table, 16 points from 10 games. They've been spanked a few times, including 8-1 by Kampong. 8-1, which, I mean, the squad they've got, they have no right losing 8-1 to anyone.
It's pretty hard when you bring in 4 new players, though, straight off the bat.
Is that the excuse now?
But the flip side is, brought in
that's what it is. Whenever you get a team with a whole bunch of new players, it does take time to settle down. You know, they usually we say half a season, depending on the number of players it takes to settle. It doesn't always mean that's the case, but it just does take a little bit of time to get used to everybody, how they play and what they do.
But didn't they bring those players? There was it's top three Australians.
Yeah, but
Three
realistically,
top Australian players.
are those players?
Lockie Sharp's not a top Australian player. I'm surprised he's there, but anyway.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, that's actually a good subject for the few minutes that we have, is the integration of players. Because when you do the Indian leagues, the guys haven't been playing, or up there, they haven't been playing together for a while either. They don't have time to do that half-season adaptation that you just mentioned.
Yeah, that's right.
And you've got to make sure the style's compatible with all the players.
Yeah. So I provided some advice for one of those teams at the Bang Mumbai team and recommended to them that their central players, their core players, came from the same country. So they picked it, and I recommended they pick the Germans.
Yeah, you did,
which is what they did.
Yep.
So I said, move away from these players, pick the German players. So they had Thueux played, and I can't remember the other ones that they picked for their spine, and they went from pretty much bottom place to second, because you've got to have your spine functioning well. And if you've got your spine from the same place, or play in the same club, or know each other well, then you're going to function better as a team. And if you've got your players that play together, right side players, for example, then it's going to be effective, but less effective than if your spine are those players that play together.
So in the Indian League, I thought the main players were from those Indian clubs, so Indian players, and they were just adding, where they felt they needed strength. They were hiring those.
No, you had to have a certain number of Indian players, and a certain number had to be on the field. But they also wanted the big name foreign players as well. And so you had those players coming in to help out the Indian players. Bear in mind, when that first started, the Indians were relatively poor, and there was a bunch of really talented young kids, and those were the kids that played in Japan. That made a difference there. So they got the young kids as part of those squads, and were given opportunities to train with, and be around and listen to them talk. Those key top players.
Most of those players now are in the Olympic team too, by the way.
Yeah, those young players are in those squads. Yeah.
Yeah, Mandeep, Lalit, Manpreet.
Manpreet played for the Bang Mumbai. He was the one we recommended for them as their best young player.
Yeah. Yep.
Really good player now.
At a high level, I guess the player are used to, after a while, with some experience, they're starting to get used to having to adapt pretty quickly, learn pretty quickly the environment, and kind of accelerate the integration phase. At a lower level, how do you see that happening, where there's less training, less time spent together?
Well, it's the same sort of thing. You've got to have the spine of the players that are the better players, and they play, and they've got the better skills. Because if you control the middle of the game, you basically control a game. So if you've got three good players and they all play deep defence, you're just going to be pressed all day.
Defending. You're going to be defending. Yeah. It comes back to where you get your players and how you're going to make that work. And you can facilitate that in training a lot. With a whole bunch of different strategies. You've got to find out what works for your team. So it could be that you dictate three players to go and practice a free hit in the field somewhere, or they go and practice a certain move, so they get familiar with the type of things that players do when they want to receive the ball, or the type of things they do when they're going to pass the ball, or whatever it might be. And so you can do that work in training and develop some understanding quite easily. And it doesn't take very long for those players to develop that. They can get that quite quickly, and that's enough at the lower levels for 2 or 3 passes to be successful. And if you've got 2 or 3 passes being successful, then you're starting to break apart an opposition.
Okay.
At a higher level, you've got to make more passes at that, right? But at a lower level, there's only 2 or 3. If you've got 3 passes in a sequence, then you're going to find you've made quite quite an impact on the opposition, and you'll find yourself, if you've got some space you can operate in.
Yeah, actually, there's one question we could have for Oliver. Did you have new players this year?
Yeah, about 10.
Okay. So how did you deal with it?
Well, I haven't dealt with it yet. It's an ongoing process. I wouldn't recommend bringing in 10 at once or a lot at once, because I think you need to bring in 2, maybe 3, bring them in, get them in so they understand what they're doing. Then you can bring in another 2 or 3. Otherwise, who's controlling the culture at that stage? Is it the old guard? Is it the new guard? Or is it somewhere in between, which leaves everyone unhappy? So for me, it's about trying to bring them together more than change the players who've come in. It's about finding common ground.
Yeah. When you got that many that are new, then really you've got a whole new team. So you got to tell everyone right at the beginning, it's going to take us a whole season to get used to even training together, because it's such a monumental change in what's going on. There aren't many teams that change 10 players in any sport, really. It's not a done thing, and the reason it's not done is because it's blooming hard to make it work properly. And so when you've got that, you've got to set up over a longer term. You're saying, year 1's going to be us getting used to each other. Year 2, we're going to improve our performance. And year 3, we're going to get good performances. That sort of thinking has to be right at the beginning, and telling everybody it's going to be difficult, getting 10 players new into this environment.
It's tough, 10 players.
Yeah, but you've got to be clear about that right up front and say, here's what we're going to achieve. We want people to get comfortable playing next to this individual or that individual, and you've got to be comfortable getting the ball from this person in that set of circumstances or whatever it might be, because everyone does these things differently. So
As I said, you've got your senior players and you've got your junior players next to the senior players, so they can start to get used to each other instinctively. Because if everybody has to think, I've got the ball and now I need to pass it, you're going to be pressed all game. So you've got to get instinctive patterns of playing. Because, if you look at if you have to think about things and it takes a second, if you could run 100 metres in 10 seconds, that's 10 metres. You'll be pressed. You can't do that in hockey, but, they could run 6 metres in 10 seconds. So the point is, in 1 second, they'll be close to you. But if you can do it instinctively, in like half a second or below, and you don't have to think because you know where the next pass is, suddenly you're not pressed. And that makes a huge difference if every player starts to become instinctive. As Anthony says, first season is getting used to each other.
Yeah, I'd say that the biggest thing is not necessarily on the pitch. It's more of the mentality and the expectations between the 2 different age groups. So one age group knows how to train, the other doesn't. One age group turns up the whole time, the other one doesn't. That's where it becomes off-field.
Yeah, there's a bunch of issues there, but you've got to set all this up right at the beginning, right? And you've got to say to everybody, we're going to learn how to play as a team during the course of this year, this season, right? So what that straight away is telling everybody is this whole teamwork component is going to be where the focus is, and we're going to have less attention paid, perhaps as a way to describe it, to whatever results on a day might be. You'd want some good results, don't get me wrong here, right? But the focus is bringing everybody together so their understanding of how to play with the people next to them, the people around them, is much better by the end of the year. And that should be a key objective.
In the first year, it's got to be somewhat off-field, more social stuff as well. So they start to understand the personalities and get on with each other, and set little goals. If you say to them, we're going to finish in the top 4, you automatically, they go, we're never going to make it. And you lose a few games. So you see, I told you we're never going to make it.
Yeah.
Particularly with girls, that come back to that social cohesion, that is crucial to make that work. And if you don't have that, you are dead in the water big time.
Yeah. We've said that before.
I seem to remember it vaguely.
It is crucial to make it work.
That's a good way to finish this conversation. Just a quick update. We're still working on getting Alison on board for the next masterclass. And Michael was talking, maybe there's going to be as well some other guys.
We'll get Scott Barker to come on. and give us
Yeah,
an
get some-
overview of a very professional hockey club, how it runs, you know, what they do and how he looks after his players and what sort of stuff that he does. So I'll get him on as well. So he'll
Okay,
be happy
that
to.
would be fantastic. Otherwise, chat sponsored by Hockey People. Yes.
Sure.
Yes. Mosquito.
Can also be, yep.
Yes. Tempest
Yeah, or why not?
as well, and Tribaal and Thueux and Hockey Sauce. So yeah,
We need to
look,
get- we need to
all
get a
over
beer
the
sponsor.
internet, all over Instagram. So that's how we'll conclude, and we'll see each other and all of you next time.
Okay.